ഹലോ ആൻഡ് വെൽക്കം ടു നൈറ്റ് ഔട്ട് ടോക്കീസ്. ഇന്ന് എൻ്റെ കൂടെയുള്ള ദ റീഡിംഗ് റൂമിലെ അർച്ചനയാണ്. വെൽക്കം ടു നൈറ്റ് ഔട്ട് ടോക്കീസ്. ദ റീഡിംഗ് റൂം ഹാസ് ബിക്കം സിനോണിമസ് വിത്ത് യുവർ നെയിം, റൈറ്റ്?
Sort of, yes.
സോ റീഡിംഗ് റൂം എന്നുള്ള ആ പേര് വന്നതിന് മുമ്പ് who were you?
Lots of things actually. So professionally, I did my civil engineering, then I did my post-graduation project management. ഈ പറയുന്ന പോലെ I was somebody who was going in that well-made path, right? So സ്കൂൾ കഴിഞ്ഞു, എഞ്ചിനീയറിംഗിന് പോയി, എഞ്ചിനീയറിംഗ് കഴിഞ്ഞ് പോസ്റ്റ് ഗ്രാജുവേഷൻ ചെയ്ത് നേരെ ജോലി കിട്ടി. ആൻഡ് ദെൻ ഐ വാസ് വർക്കിംഗ് ആസ് എ പ്രോജക്ട് മാനേജർ ഇൻ ദ കൺസ്ട്രക്ഷൻ ഇൻഡസ്ട്രി. അപ്പം മോസ്റ്റ് ഓഫ് മൈ വർക്ക് ടുക്ക് മീ ഔട്ട്സൈഡ് ഓഫ് കേരള. ഞാൻ കുറേ നാൾ ഹൈദരാബാദിൽ വർക്ക് ചെയ്തു, ചെന്നൈയിൽ വർക്ക് ചെയ്തു, അങ്ങനെ ആൻഡ് ഐ വാസ് ഡൂയിങ് വെരി ബിഗ് പ്രോജക്ട്സ് വിത്ത് ദീസ് പ്രോജക്ട് മാനേജ്മെന്റ് കൺസൾട്ടൻസീസ്. So primarily, if I were to define who was I professionally, I was a civil engineer and a project manager in the construction industry, which continued actually. ഞാൻ ട്രിവാൻഡ്രത്ത് വന്നതിന് ശേഷം I was still doing that work. പിന്നെ one conversation that I always have with people when I'm having conversations is to not, when someone asks who are you, why do we define ourselves by our profession, right? So we either say I am a doctor or an engineer or whatever, or we say I'm a wife and a mother. So it's always our role in connection to something else. So other than that, if I were to remove that, I would say I was a reader primarily, always, and probably very nomad, because a lot of my childhood was also very nomadic. ഞാൻ ഒരു സ്ഥലത്ത് അധികം നാൾ നിന്ന് വളരാനുള്ള ഒരു ഓപ്പർച്യൂണിറ്റി അല്ലായിരുന്നു എൻ്റെത്. So a lot of these things probably,
Your father was in the army?
My father and mother were officers in the army.
Okay, so that's why you had a nomadic.
Yes, very nomadic childhood. I have not stayed in a city for more than a year and a half or 2 years.
Okay.
So in my entire childhood, I've changed schools, cities, friends, everything.
Okay. What was your turning point?
Moving to Trivandrum. Lots of things had been playing at the back of my head. Like I said, because of the nomadic life, I think when people ask me what was constant, I don't have siblings. So the only constant in my life other than my parents, it was in friends, it was in school. I didn't have my grandparents or anyone around me. So the only other constant I had was books. Obviously, we only realize this in hindsight, right? At that time, it's all just normal. So I know that books had always played a very important part in my life, to the point where I could not be without books. I had like this, when we get transferred, sometimes we spend 3-4 days in trains. At that time, we didn't have fast trains and also. It never felt boring for a child. Ideally, you think you'd get bored, but for me, it was the only thing I needed was just keep buying me books. So I know that was a very important part. Second thing was my career. As I was working in project management, and the time that I joined the industry, I think it still is a little too male dominated, right? The contractors and there are engineers and architects who are women, and now the numbers are increasing, but on site we would not have a lot of women. And the culture is also a little loud, right? There's a lot of screaming and shouting, and I couldn't go in there, and I did not want to become one of the boys, so to speak. So I realized very early that project management was going to be 99% people management. My role is to just make sure everyone does their role. And that's going to take a lot of communication, but it did not seem like a big struggle, even though there was this obvious difference. To know how to speak to people, to know whom to approach in what manner, to know how to write mails, reports, all of this I felt came naturally to me. And the only explanation I have for that probably is all the reading I have done and all the traveling, which gave me exposure to a lot of different people and different sorts of communication. So at a very early point in my career, I realized that words and language is going to be the defining part of everything I do, even success in my career. And then as years go by and then you grow in an organization, new people come and join you. We have to train people. We have to make sure they do the right thing too, or they figure out how to talk to people. At the end of the day, if you write a very formal sounding mail to a contractor saying, hello, I request you, it will not connect. You should know. I'm not saying you have to be rude, but you should know what will connect and what. So I feel like at some point also there was this frustration that this had to be natural. You can teach or train to a certain point, a 25, 26-year-old person, but their main personality is already made by then. So this whole thing of language, that was somewhere there at the back of my head. Then we moved to Trivandrum, and initially when I moved, I didn't intend to stay here. I had always had the idea that I'll go back after I had actually come here for the delivery of my child. And then I had thought I'd go back after a year or so and then rejoin my career. But then life happened, a lot of things happened, and then I was not able to move. By the time my son was around 2.5, 3 years old, when he started Montessori, I would read. Like from the moment he was born, I think we had this whole point of reading together at night, and that became a very cute moment. It was not about reading the book or finishing the book. It was how lovely that moment was, and before sleeping. So that happened, and his language also I think developed, and then people would ask me when they see him in train with a book and instead of an iPad or whatever, people would ask me, his Montessori teacher started asking me, and then I explained, this is all I do. Then they called me. So this was even before Reading Room, around 2013-ish. They called me and said if I could take some sessions with children, how do I do, language development through stories. That time I was like, am I even qualified to do this, I would just read stories and then open up conversations. That actually became quite a hit. Like people liked it, children loved it, parents loved it. Others Montessori's called me. I started randomly whenever I got time from work on, like not weekends, but when the schools were there, but I could just excuse myself from work. I started going to these schools and doing these sessions. And I was having a blast. So that went on for 2-3 years, and I saw that the response was really way better than at first. It was just, hey, I'm just going and reading a story. But the response from parents was so much so that I felt like, should I just do this, And then by then it had cemented in my head that I'm going to be in Trivandrum for some time, which was never the plan. And Trivandrum, I felt like I need a space of my own. Because I did feel like an outsider, honestly, because I didn't grow up here. I didn't have a lot of school friends. I left right after college. Everything else was also... So I wanted a small space that felt like a safe, comfortable space for me and others like me, who would feel welcomed and, heard and all of that. And I also wanted a space, and that was my primary thing, where children could just come and enjoy stories without feeling like a task or without feeling like they're expected to read a book and write reviews and all that. So, and that whole language thing from corporate, all of this came together, and I took a very small space for rent on that Kavadiya Rambalamukka Road. Started with that small 2 rooms and all the books that I had collected, just my personal collection, and I put all of that in and started the space, and I just sat there thinking, now what? Right? Because getting people to come, I'm not someone who's very good at like marketing myself, and no one in my life has ever done a business that way. So I did not really have any learning experience. I just started. Then one person came, 2 people came, and that's basically how. So it's not a turn. Even when I started that, it was a weekend thing. Monday to Friday I would go to work. Saturday, Sunday I would do these story sessions, and small children from the neighborhood started coming in, and that's how it started.
Wow. So do you remember your first experience reading to the kids, like the first book you read to them?
First book, I know one among the first books was called The Gruffalo. It's a book by Julia Donaldson, and Julia Donaldson has a series of books where she tells very fun stories as a rhyme. The whole book is a rhyme, and that connects to children. They love the fact that certain words and phrases are repeated. So after the first or second instance, they understand the pattern, they start repeating with you, and that activity immediately hooks them into the book and the experience of reading. So I may not remember exactly the first book, but I do remember this was one among...
What was the thought behind the selection of the book?
Okay, one, I didn't want books that had morals. That was my first thought, because we really should not make every experience in a child's life about learning a lesson. They are learning enough lessons, right, every day. So, especially reading, for me, it was such a personal choice. For them also, I felt like we should do something that makes reading more personal than a task. So I was somehow very clear that I didn't want books with lessons.
Okay.
And the second thing was books they could interact with. So every time I read a book, be it at home with my son or at the reading room, I'm not looking to finish the book,
Okay.
teach them something, read them question, answer, ask them questions from the book to understand how much of the content they have understood. I am looking to have conversations and discussions. How did they feel about something? Why do they think a character took a certain decision? Like Gruffalo, if you know, there's this whole idea about other animals wanting to eat a little mouse and how the mouse escapes from them. So there's a line where they all come and say, come and have lunch with me. So I stop to ask, do you think the fox will give the mouse lunch? And they say, no. So I say, then what do you think will happen? There's always going to be one of those very, very extroverted kids who will say, the mouse will become the fox's lunch, right? So these things add so much interest in the class and so much activity. It's not just, oh, someone's telling something, I have to for 40 minutes keep quiet and listen. I don't think it's natural to make children keep quiet and sit in a place. I think learning is better when they're interacting with the subject than just meant to just quietly absorb. So that was it. And a lot of these books became easy because 3 years prior to reading room starting, I was already, not 3 years, 6 years, because by 2016 my son was 6 years old. I had already had a whole collection of books that I would read for him. And I already knew what worked, what didn't work, what really absorbed him. So it was kind of easier to just pick from the favorites.
Okay. Tell me about the growth of the reading room. It went from a 2-room establishment to a big standalone, the reading room. So how did people start coming in, and was it the kids who brought in the adults, or was it the other way around?
That's a very good question. See, when it comes to kids, though we are targeting the kids, the target audience has to be the parents, right? So they have to bring in the kids. But at the end of the day, it is going to be the kids who will bring in other kids, because unless these guys are really showing a development and interest and something. See, the thing about the reading room is it's not something that I can give a mark for or a certificate for. I can't say, you have now learned this skill. It's a life skill, it's a personality skill. So it is very difficult for me to advertise like schools do and say, oh, we have so many A+, and it had to be the kids and the parents telling other kids and parents about the space. So if you notice, I have zero advertisement out there. I think in 10 years, I don't still think a lot of people have heard about this space. But it's all just...
I'll disagree to that, because I think a lot of people have.
But it's still whatever little, and I'm very bad at social media. So in 10 years, even my page is some 5,000-6,000 followers. I don't think I've done a lot. But whatever I do, I put it on, the only option I have to advertise is social media. Newspapers helped a lot.
Okay.
Very unexpectedly, I had newspapers coming and saying, hey, something very new or novel has started here. We have not heard about something like this. So in the very beginning, in the first 2-3 years, I think we got a lot of articles from the Hindu and Indian Express and everybody, like a lot of different people just coming and saying, what was your idea? How do you think this is going to work? So that created some curiosity. But mostly, yes, it was kids and parents telling their neighbors, people in their flat. I think flats helped a lot because 1 or 2 kids come from the flat and they like it.
Okay.
They tell other parents. They were cousins. Eventually, I think by the 3rd or 4th year, I knew certain, I personally didn't know them, but I knew of certain psychologists as well as teachers, school teachers, who were recommending parents to improve language, to improve speech, to the reading room. Not as a treatment, but because it is a very casual space. There is no pressure to perform. Whatever might be holding them back from putting themselves out there, there might be certain fears or anxieties that a performative, place, environment gives you. That I felt reading room did not have. So there were people. So slowly I heard people say, "Ee school le teacher varnitana varunathu." Allengi kunningine samsarichu thodangilla. Adondu njangal psychologist neduthu poyi. Appo pullikari parnu idonnu try cheyidu nokkan. So these things started happening. So I felt like it is a very collective word of mouth thing that has sent people to But if you specifically ask about space, it was the summer camps.
Okay.
So from the very beginning, one thing I did was to have these very fun summer camps full of stories, expressions. I had theater, dance, every different way of expressing yourself, because I do believe that instead of telling all children to do everything well, you give them everything and let them figure out what they do well.
Yeah.
So we would have a lot of different people coming in. There were art and craft, writing, reading, speaking, acting, body movement, everything.
Okay.
So summer camps became, even though the class would remain small, I would not usually have more than 10 kids because I want everyone to express themselves in that 1 or 2 hours. Summer camps sort of started becoming bigger.
Okay.
So that's how we just felt that these 2 rooms won't do. We need a bigger space, and then we moved to the Jawahar Nagar space.
Okay.
Jawahar Nagar space would have remained if lockdown hadn't
COVID,
hit.
yeah.
So then lockdown forced us to close that down. Then I was so tired of moving everything because I have some closer to 10,000 books.
Okay.
So boxing them up and moving them from place to
Yeah.
place is very impractical. Finally, I decided if I'm ever going to open this up again after lockdown, I need a space of my own where I wouldn't be forced to leave, with all these books. That's how finally I made the space in Srigarham.
How did you fare during COVID? Like, I guess most of it went online during that time. But how was that moving from offline to online as an experience? How was it for you?
It was, okay, so the first 6 months I was in denial.
Okay.
I was constantly thinking that this can't be the reality of the world, that things will open up anytime soon and we'll go back to normal. I think all of us were, right, for quite a long time. Parents started calling and asking, can you at least start this online? Because suddenly the kids, that reading habit is going down, schools have become online, entertainment has become online, even meeting friends is online. So I actually then refused, saying, then this will also become online, right? So the whole point of the reading room for me was offline interactions.
Yeah.
That people should communicate and come and sit together and talk. By then, even the other community events had started at the older place. We had all the others opportunities for people to come together. So I was very taken aback that this could even be a possibility, because I thought that will sort of ruin the intent of what I'm trying to do.
Yeah.
But there were a few parents who had also over a period of time become good friends, thankfully, who sort of told me, listen, if you do this online for 1 hour, the rest of the time they might actually still go back to books and give them some writing activity. And I give them writing activity that thankfully most of them enjoy doing. They don't do it like homework. So they would do that, and that would help us keep them off of screens. So then I thought, okay, let's try. And honestly, learning what Zoom is, now it's become so normal, right? Or what Google, this thing is, it just learning, and it was a little bit of a transition, seeing children online. And because for me, communication was so much the core of it, doing it online never felt satisfactory. I always somewhere felt like resisting it. But I also realized that it was helping. Children were genuinely reading more once the classes restarted. Parents were happy. So for me, the biggest thing is when parents say, okay, thank God you started this, because now they spend at least an hour or 2 reading instead of constantly in front of the TV. So I think that it was definitely a very difficult transition.
How did you adapt? Like, what did you have to change in yourself to make the online classes more fun and interactive? Because there's a little bit of screen fatigue also coming in.
There is screen fatigue, and because it's kids, and you can't blame them for getting bored. Offline, it's easier to hold their attention. Online, even if I have half the number of kids, I have to put double the effort to appear, interesting enough to hold their interest. So even if teachers, everybody who was teaching, if you ask them, they had to get a lot more animated, I feel. And it was subconscious. You're not thinking this. You're, as people who deal with children, you realize when you're losing them. So you have to become more animated. Suddenly you are asking more questions. Like, what do you think about this? What is going on, right? In the book. And I felt like it genuinely was a lot more it doesn't feel physical because you're just sitting on a chair, but it felt more physical effort. I did find myself a lot more tired after an online session. So till very recently, actually, till December 2025, we had our online session. So 2 days a week, I kept online sessions. Because by this time during lockdown we had a few children join in from outside of Kerala. So I had children from Dubai and Abu Dhabi and all that joining in, and then I also had Bangalore, Bombay, Malayali kids predominantly, but who could not access the session, and they did not want it to stop even after the place opened. So I continued, but I realized that I am on these 2 days, Tuesdays and Thursdays, I am just done, you know, after the session. So consciously, I genuinely don't know what I changed, but I feel like that putting that extra animation and effort and making sure they're all like you're connecting to them a lot more through a screen, that definitely happens subconsciously.
What was your vision when you built this new space for yourself? What did you want that space to be like? Like we all have, I mean, anybody who is a reader will have that, you know, that ideal library space in our head, right? Like, I want to build a library like this one. So, what was yours like?
Having a space full of books, which would bring in people who liked books and conversations about books was, I think, the primary thought. I don't think I had, I know it is not a good thing to say this, because especially when you're running something of your own, as a business person, people expect you to say, oh, I had a business plan and I had a vision and a mission. For me, primarily, like I told you in the beginning, there was a sense of I need a safe space. For me, safety was always associated with books. So I need a safe space for myself. And I wasn't seeing grown-ups at that time. I was seeing kids who were like me when I had first come to Trivandrum, would have liked a quiet place to belong. So I think somewhere a space, a safe space full of books was the core of it for children predominantly. Everything else, like if there is a space like that, the whole communication angle will come in. Children will become confident about words and expressions just because they're using words and expressions in a more organic and natural way. That was there, and I saw this through the eyes of my son, because as he was growing up, the one thing I noticed is, I think that was a big turning point for me. One thing I noticed is when I was small, and because I grew up inside cantonments, we had a lot of unstructured playtime. We were allowed to run free because inside an army cantonment, I think parents are a little less concerned about how unsafe you're. You're not very, you're very safe in that area. So you go to school with the same set of people, you come back from the same school with the same set of people, you live in the same colony, so to speak. And then by evening, you're all out playing together, running around, hiding, doing this, that. So it was very, and I feel like that does somewhere, because as a child, you don't know about safety, this, that and all, but it gives you a sense of independence and confidence. When somebody fights with you, you figure out who you are, how will you respond, how do you talk to people. And I felt like a lot of kids these days, at least from my son's point of view, what I saw is don't have that unstructured playtime. So they are going to a structured environment where they are being told how to behave, when to talk, when not to talk, to other structured environments, and then home. And home is also mostly 1 or 2 kids and then a lot of adults. So I felt like that somewhere was niggling me, that this fellow is not getting to just randomly talk and play with other children. So that was a big part of, I want that. See, at the end of the day, predominantly I started it for children. The idea was a kid's space where children in this very digital era could, one, learn to love books, and 2, actually get to talk to other human beings, not through the screen. So I think that for me was the main idea.
What was your brief to your civil engineer or architect? How did you explain this space to them?
So my architect is AN Designs, her name is Anavadya. So one good thing is when I got the second space, the Jawahar Nagar space, even though it was an existing old building, I had asked her for help as to what do I do, how do I make this look a lot. So the color, we had very bright teal and yellow rooms and all. So so she helped me a lot with existing furniture. We didn't put in a lot of money, but with existing furniture and paint colors and wall murals and all, what we could do. So I think the fact that she knew what the reading room was from the very beginning, and she knew exactly what I want from the space, was helped a lot, because I did not have to sit down and explain the vibe I'm trying to create or the outcome I'm trying to create. The warmth and coziness was always a big part of it. When I moved to this place, my brief is very clear. Because I had run this now for 5-6 years, I knew exactly what spaces I want, and I knew exactly what function I wanted those spaces to do. Third thing is, I myself, being from this field, from construction, I knew exactly what the architect wants from me. And fourth and most important thing is, by then I was so clear that now that I'm doing my own space, it has to be exactly how, you know, the question you asked earlier, as a reader, that picture was always there, that I want at least one room which would have floor to ceiling books, and I wanted a very rustic cottage like vibe. So I want, it is this space, if you have seen, it has basically open bricks, and very brick and airy and light, and I always had that very rustic, cottagey vibe in my mind from probably forever. I don't know when that idea first came into my mind, but so that was also clear. And she did a fantastic job of understanding all of this and putting it on paper exactly how I wanted it. So.
What was your reaction to the final, you know, the first day you stepped into it, to the completed the reading room?
See, that's a difficult question. You know why? Because I have been part of
the building
process. So it's not like you open a door to a new space, right? You've seen it getting built step by step.
But maybe the first response from a child when they came into the reading room.
I think I still feel that. Every time a new child or a new grown-up walks in and says, whoa, there's a place like this in Trivandrum. I'm like, wow. So I think that's
You've achieved what you set out to do.
I think that atmosphere is a big part of it. Even in the space in Jawahar Nagar, it was a smaller space where we kind of made do with the rooms that was there. One thing that I loved to hear from people is they felt comfortable. They felt very at home and, you know, invited and warm. That coziness is very important to me. To me personally, not even for me to create. I feel like I always want to be in such calm, cozy spaces. For a good almost 15 years, I worked in corporates. I've sat in corporate offices. This is something I feel is a lot more me than that me.
So from how you started, like 10 years of reading room, right? What are the changes that have come in the reading room? Like, it started with just a space for kids to come in and read. What is it now? What do you mean for it to be? Like, what is its position in society?
I think a big part of it is a community. It's not one community, but a space where a lot of different communities have come, built, thrived. And when I say community, the idea is just a bunch of people coming together and finding it safe to express themselves. So I feel like that's become the whole idea of it. Even with the children's session, where we have definite goals that we are reading more and writing more and talking more. Why it is working, I have understood. Why it has worked so far, at least, is because the kids love it. Not because it's something they have to do, not because it's something they have to perform for anybody else or themselves, but because they also feel like, oh, this space, I like going there. I love having these conversations. So I think just becoming that space where people feel comfortable to come and express, I think is a big part of it. Because that's all there is. Everything is group activities. From the children's session to our weekend events, it is all just people coming together and talking. I always say this, we have a book club, a poetry club, or a writer's club, or a movie club, or any of this. These are all excuses at the end of the day to bring people together. 10, 15, 20 people come together, start talking about whatever the theme is, and then eventually become comfortable enough to talk about anything else, right? They are expressing themselves, they're opening up, they are saying things they would never. See, one thing again we have seen from the first open mic is there were always going to be 7, 8 people who would say we will perform. And there'll be a bunch of people who would say we have just come to watch. after these 7-8 performances, when people would open up and when others would see how it was being received, no judgment. I think it's our system where we are so used to everything being performative, everything being done to either win a prize or get marks. Somewhere that fear of failure and judgment is there in our brain. But when you see the small crowd, and that is also why I don't ever make big events. It's not doable, but it's just the whole point of the reading room is small, very intimate gatherings, very comfortable crowds. I have seen at the end of open mic people saying, hey, listen, is it okay if I share something? And the amount of people who come up and share without being prepared or without ever intending to, just because they felt that the crowd was just sitting there to sort of hear them and, you know, help them belong, so to speak. I do feel that somewhere that has become the main thing. So we, like, the book club meets once a month. And then we have the WhatsApp group which constantly discusses what's happening and when is the next meetup and all. And there are months when, for some reason or the other, I've not been able to do. There are people who ask, when is it? When is it? See, at the end of the day, what is it giving you? Everyone's sitting at home and reading. You don't need to come there. But even then, that sense of let's sit together and talk. What brings people back month after month for so many years to just discuss the books they've read, right? There's nothing else if you think about it. I feel that sense of belonging, that sense of safe space. We talk about third spaces now. I think the conversation is slowly coming back. Initially, we had a lot of these common chai kada in Kerala was a third space. It didn't serve the purpose of just going and drinking a tea. It was a place where people would just come together, read newspapers, have
conversation,
discussions, important political discussions, right? Similarly, we had these art club cultures and the Vayanashala, not the big library, the small ones, community Vayanashala, sports centers. These, more than everything else, provided something very, very essential for human beings, which was the sense of community and belonging. It's not that you're needed there. You're not asked to perform there. You're not working there, right? You're just going there for that sense. I feel like reading room does serve somewhere, fill in that purpose of third spaces a lot. In the last 10 years it has happened, because when I started it, I had none of this concept in my brain. It was just a space for children to come and enjoy reading and talking. But somewhere I have realized that this concept, and I've realized it from the reactions of other people who keep coming back and talking about how they felt being there. And then obviously reading about it and realizing that there is a concept like this. Because when I started, I had people asking why. What is a purpose? It's not a cafe. You're not, there's no product, right? So what are you doing? Like, you're just calling people, why will they come? I have heard all these. I've had people come and ask me, it's not even a tuition center, right? Are you teaching anything? So, because we are very purpose driven, we need that sense of tangible purpose. And I have sat and thought about it. Okay, will no one come? Am I serving no purpose? I did not know it was about the third space, but I think in very short, that is what it does.
You also have a lot of discussions around mental health, right?
Yes.
What has made you speak about this openly? In the sense, like, you know that in Trivandrum, there's very little, or there was very little conversation about mental health, and people go on as if like nothing has happened in their life. But now the Gen Z and the millennials are talking more about it, and you also make an effort to talk about it. Was it your experience, all your life experience, or was it something you saw in others that made you want to talk about it? And
no, I think it was personally my life experience. I did not realize, I think we are all in that boat, is we don't realize a lot of learned behavior and reactions and why we are a certain way. We just know we are a certain way, and most of the time our reaction is to be harsher on ourselves for behaving a certain way or being that way. I think it was books. I think a lot of reading had somewhere that taboo didn't stick as much as there are other people writing about it. So when you read about it, and you read books like Bell Jar or whatever, and mental health is all over in those books. So I felt like somewhere I didn't feel like it was a taboo topic just because of how much exposure I got to it just by reading. But it became more necessary to me. It became something important to me when I had my child. As a parent, somewhere, I don't know how it happened, but a switch flipped. Somewhere I just knew what are the things I don't want to put my kid through. Even before terms like you said Gen Z and all of that made these terms like cycle breaking very popular, and thank God for that, and thank God for social media, because a lot of these things we know. But even before I knew the term for it, that you're breaking a cycle, I knew I wanted to do it. I knew that okay, something has made me behave a certain way, something has made me react or respond to the world in a certain way, and it is very limiting and it is very difficult to be myself. And you know, I've put so much on myself to be accepted and liked and everything, and I don't want my child to suffer. I don't want my child to ever think that he needs to perform for anybody else's benefit. Obviously you don't hurt other people, and you don't become so callous that oh njan ingane aanu. That's not what I mean. But also, everything shouldn't be about walking on eggshells so that everyone else around you is happy. I think this also happened because a lot of personal things in my life, like I told you in the beginning, I was this good girl, right? I was doing everything that my parents expected of me: school, college, PG, job, marriage, child. It's not that I don't rebel, I didn't even think it was necessary. I was like, this is what everyone does, this is how the world works. You even don't stop to even question. Till things happen and you're like, I did everything right, right? What is happening? The second thing that is, I think, really had an impact on me is the first time around when I came to Trivandrum, I was around 8th, 9th standard, right? Till then I was an army kid. It is a very different upbringing. When I came here and I was suddenly put into that, it's a very delicate age, 13, 14. You're already confused about yourself and emotions and feelings and hormones and looks and everything. And suddenly I'm in a very, very different atmosphere from what I was used to. My entire life looked different. People saw me differently. It was very, very difficult for me to be accepted. And it felt like for example, very small example, I think a lot of youngsters might not these days might not agree. But when I came here, because I spoke differently or behaved a little differently, there was already this, who is she? What does she think of herself? Now, if I first I used to talk to everybody because I did not know you're not supposed to. So I used to be very open and I used to talk to people. There was a lot of judgment. They were like, oh, you know, like there's a lot of shaming and everything. The shaming got to me, and at that age, it impacted me. I internalized it. I was like, oh, something is wrong with me. I'm doing something wrong. Am I like how they are making stories? Maybe I am. Maybe I should stop talking. Suddenly I went into a shell. I stopped participating. I stopped going to stage, which is very, very difficult for me because till then I have gone for everything. I studied in KV. Now, Kendriya Vidyalaya, we have every Saturday, we used to have these last 2 periods called CCA, co-curricular activity, where one way or the other you end up participating for something or the other. I thought it was a very good system. I stopped. I didn't want attention. I didn't want people making stories about me. I would not really want to be seen at all. Then people started saying, jaade aanu, windu. So it was so frustrating inside my head at that time was, whatever I do, I am wrong. And I am wrong. I'm not thinking they are bad. I'm thinking I am doing everything wrong. I'm a failure. I don't know how to be myself. So this was a big part of what I was carrying. Then college happened and then I left. And when I came back, like I told you, I had no intentions of settling. I thought after my child is born, after some time I'd go back. But when I realized I'm going to live here, at first there was definitely that sense of fear. Now I'm an adult, okay, I'm a mother. But even then, that internalized fear of Trivandrum will not accept me, everyone's going to hate me, was very strong. And then life happened. So many things happened that I was like, oh, now I'm anyway labeled. Now people are not going to like me much anyway. The moment I accepted that and I somewhere broke that need to make people like me or to live up to everybody's expectations, I felt more myself and I felt like I got more people who like me for being myself. So over the last 10 years, there have been friendships that I have made not because I'm trying hard to make them like me, but because finally people just see me and accept me for who I am, which makes you feel good about yourself.
You deal with a lot of kids, right? And you've seen some kids grow up, I guess, over the last 10 years. You also become like a custodian of their mental health also at some point, right? Because you're seeing them express, you're facilitating their expression. How do you figure out when there's something wrong in their lives, or do you detect it first before the parents? Have there been instances when like some things have like called out to you about some of the kids, what they're going through, something which their parents might not have seen, something which you facilitated through your space for expression?
Multiple things have happened. It's easy to deal with it when it's school related. I have had kids who have come and told me about being bullied in their school bus, and now they hate going to school. So randomly we are reading a book. Obviously it's a book related to children, so some school related conversation will come up, and then I open up, we are having conversation, and then some child will say, I hate going to school. So I'm like, what do you not like about it? It's common to not like. So what do you not like about it? See, I think why they open up is, instead of saying you hate school, you shouldn't hate school. They are like, okay, fair enough. What do you not like about it? Slowly these stories will come out. I have children who bully me. Sometimes it's just a school bus. Sometimes it's one teacher who hits them a lot, or they scare them a lot. These are things that I've brought up to the parents. I think in a way I'm lucky, because parents who have understood the need for a space like the reading room. So they bring their children to the reading room. They don't think everything should be about studying just math, science and getting marks, right? They are also sensitive and receptive when I say something like this. So it has never been met with a lot of denial that way. So whenever I said, listen, I think something like this is going on, have you sort of, has he or she told you about it? Bunch of times it is like a new thing for them. I have also had parents come and tell me the child is going through such and such thing. I feel like when I tell, or when a teacher says in school, they feel like they're being forced or pressured, but if you say, she will listen. So I've had parents come and say, ingane onnu parayavo, onnu korchum koodi idu cheyan par. So for example, very recently there's a child who comes there who is very smart. I have always found this child very smart, because when I'm reading a book, the kind of insights this kid comes up with is amazing. Now the parent comes and tells me, for the last, I think 1 year, the parent has been facing a difficulty from the school side, as in they're not getting marks, the kid is not getting marks, the teachers are saying that they're not going to do well, you might have to repeat the year, and what's wrong with my kid? That anxiety is there. Now, but I did not know any of this in the first or second class. When the mom came and asked me, I said, oh, he's very smart. She's like, what? Then over a period of time, I figured out he just doesn't like writing. Basically, that's the only thing. Now, everything in school will be judged on how much you write. You can't just leave your question paper unanswered. And so how do we find a solution around this? And so the other day, I just said, listen, I think you write beautifully. Your stories are amazing. I don't think you have to write neatly. But can you just make sure I can understand the letters? So if you're writing an A, make sure it looks like an A. So when I read, I can read through the story well. And that's all the child is doing. He's just making his letters legible. The mom is thrilled, the kid is thrilled. And these are very small things, right? So they do happen. There are concerns. There are some children where the opposite has happened. I have had a mother who's come and said that this child, the teacher said that he's definitely ADHD. He's not listening in class, will not sit still for 10 minutes. You have to send them to some counselor. We are suggesting counseling. But the child sits in the reading room class. So I'm like, that's the only thing is, I'm not telling them to sit silent. Some children will get agitated when they are asked to sit silent. So I do, thankfully, like I was saying, I do have parents who are receptive and open to me communicating this with them, or them communicating this with me, which helps us work with the children very well. Like the other day, a child who had started coming to me when he was around 3.5, 4 years old. Now he's around 6.5, 7. Wants to read bigger books, but whenever I suggest, I think you can read this, your reading level has improved. It's like, no. I think parents or grandparents, somebody asks them questions from the book when they read. So they are scared that when they take bigger books, they can't answer the questions. I just called the parent and said, what is happening is, it's sort of discouraging the kid from reading. Even if the book is big, and even if he doesn't understand, he's pushing to read, which is rare. So let him. they understood.
Okay.
So a lot of times I have gotten very positive feedback, as in reception. If I say something is a concern, they do listen.
Okay.
So that helps. One or two times where I've had a trouble is once a child casually told me that I hate going back home because my father hits my mother.
Okay.
Now that was difficult because who do I say this to? Right? So I had a conversation with the child and I sat down, how do you feel? What do you do when this happens? And the child felt more comfortable and broke out of this very, like an angry shell. And I did see a change in the child just because they had an adult to talk to. But it was so delicate for me to deal with this. One day, instead of the father, when the mother came, I said, I'm really sorry, this is none of my business. I know it's a very personal thing, but once a long time back, your child has said something like this a few months back. And I think it's affecting him, and I'm sure it's affecting you. And, is there anything you think you can do to at least protect him from this whole situation? I don't want you to answer to me, but I just wanted you to know. I think somewhere that gave the mother the strength to take a stand too. I'm not sure exactly what she did, and I'm not really tried to find out, but it did make a difference in both of them. And another thing is, in a few months, I think the child really flowered, like really opened up. So there have been definitely moments,
As you talk, I feel the need to have more of these spaces for our kids, like the reading room. Have you found people like you, like who you can pass on your legacy to, or at least to trust someone else to run the show, maybe in a branch of the reading room or something like that?
I think that has been my biggest challenge, because reading room is not a business, right? It's not a profitable business to the point where in 10 years we have become a conglomerate. I think that does matter that I don't do it. Obviously there is a fee, and parents do pay a monthly fee so that the place can keep running, and a lot of our community events are free. The book club is free, debate club is free, movie club, a lot of these events are free. We have a meetup every month called Coffee and Conversation, which is just a bunch of people coming together and talking and sharing on different. So the reason why we can do free events is because this fee comes in, but it's not something that is like profitable, so to speak, in a very growth sense. So two problems with that is, one, finding people that I can pay enough money to want to train and stay, which I understand. Obviously everyone has a financial need, and when they're spending hours working somewhere. So I am very open about the fact from the very beginning, this is a small space, it's a single owner space, it's not a business, it's not like an enterprise where I can sort of. I have been lucky to have a lot of interns who have come and helped and been passionate about to help. But I've also had issues with, after some time, people saying, it's okay if they move on. I've had a lot of these interns who worked with me and moved on, but once or twice it so happens wherein somewhere, I am not getting tens of thousands comes in. So that is a small issue, because there are people I've trained. There are people who had reached a point where if I'm not there, they can take 1 or 2 classes. But to come from this space of caring and understanding, that has to come from inside, I feel. So when I even look for other people, I either get teachers who have a goal. We have to finish this book and ask reviews. Or it comes from a place of, okay, my job is to read a story and get my money. It's very difficult for me. So I have had opportunities in the last 10 years where from Bangalore and Cochin, I've had multiple people ask me to open a branch. They're ready to fund it, they want to have a space, but then who will take the class? Where do I find that? Right? Because it's not a class. It is not a, it's a space, it's a safe space where they are learning to be themselves. I don't know. It's that's my biggest challenge at the reading room, I think, is how do I get someone else to do the same thing? I don't even need them to do it my way, right? Everyone will come with their own styles. But that intentionality, I feel, is very difficult.
Has there ever been a point when, as you said, it's not, you don't make a lot of money with this thing. Have you ever thought that I should stop this and do something which gives me more financial,
See, I made money when I was working. So I know that side of working in a corporate for money. And I know, and I was good. See, I'm not going to be one of those people who say, oh my God, corporate life is so tough. Or, it was so much that I had to, I gave it up or sacrificed it to start. So, none of that. I enjoyed my corporate life. I had great teams, great mentors. I did some really good projects that I'm proud of. It was just circumstances that brought me here. So I started the reading room, and now reading room has become. So I know that side, and I love that side. But do I want to go back to the rat race? Never.
Okay.
The amount of, how do I put it? The amount of a sense of purpose and a sense of joy that it gives me every time a parent texts me saying, I just 2-3 days back I got a text from a parent with a voice note from a teacher and a video of the kid talking, saying, where is he even? The teacher is saying in the voice note, where is he learning? I mean, we teach them to speak, but this is a drastic change. And then the parent said, ma'am, it is all because it feels so weird when I'm saying this, but I don't think any amount of money can replace that satisfaction. That just fills my heart. So
I think it's very visible to you also, right? The change that comes in the kids, like you can see them grow in front of your eyes, and that's very rewarding in itself.
It is very rewarding, and I don't think money can replace. While I say that, I'm not going to say money is not important or anything. It does come from a space of privilege that I should acknowledge. That thankfully I got the support from my family and from all the opportunities I have gotten before this to be able to do this and not be worried about making enough money to live. I will never place myself as a very sacrificial person who's suffering or anything. It definitely comes from a space that I had very grateful to have had the opportunity to do this. Having said that, there are months where it becomes tight. So now over 10 years, the schedule is very clear in my brain. There are exam months and holiday months. So Onam. So Onam exam will happen, then Onam vacation will happen. Christmas exam. So these are months where business is very bad, right? Like most of the kids are first busy learning and then they're busy traveling to their native places or wherever. So, but now I've sort of become used to it. Okay, what I have started now doing to not feel stressed about it is, oh great, Onam is my free month. It's going to be a little lighter. Let me plan something. So I'm also sort of trying to go with that. Where is a challenge when there is not enough money is getting staff, right? So to get enough people to be able to pay them a lot of money. I'm very bad at social media. If you see my videos, you know they are made by someone who has no idea what social media is. But to get someone, to pay someone to do social media for me, then to pay someone to handle the space or to take sessions, it's a lot. And that kind of income doesn't happen. So these are the challenges where then I'm like, okay, I might as well just do it.
But I think thankfully the reading room has grown by word of mouth. I think a lot of people write about the experiences. That's how a lot of people like me have come to know about it and visited you and all that. What is the one thing you want to implement in reading room which is still a challenge for you?
Okay, so one dream that I had that reading room would also add into its posse would be to publish. It still is a dream, not a dream that is in air, but we have like a parent company that I have registered as a publishing space. But I have, again, setting up a team and because that becomes a whole flow of events. You need team, you need like designers and editors. But I have children who write beautifully. Over the last 10 years, they've become amazing. And I feel like their word needs to come out. So to be able to publish, I think would be something that I really, really look forward to doing at some point. It's a very, I don't think I've openly spoken about it, but it's a very, very big part of where I want reading room to go. But other than that, personally, if I were to speak, just having a small team who genuinely believe in what is happening and can step in for me. It's not just so that I can take holidays. It's also so that for whatever reason, if I'm not able to be there, to know someone will be able to handle it the same way as I do, will be able to be there for the children the same way as I can. that would have been amazing.
Thank you so much for
Thank
coming
you.
to Night Talkies. I think there's still a lot of things I wanted to talk to you, which is still left unsaid. Maybe another episode.
It is my pleasure.
Thank you so
So
much.
glad to be here.
Thank you.
Also, I have to say this, you are very amazing to talk to.
Thank
The
you.
way you question and the way you listen, it just makes one want to open up.
Thank you so much.